All right. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. And good evening. Thank you for checking in. It's your host, Brian Forbes. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Black Factor. And tonight is, or should I say today, is the anniversary of the assassination of one Fred Hampton, Black Panther, a very extraordinary brother. Good evening, Big Nate. I see you. Thank you for checking in. Mr. Marshall, thank you for hanging out with me. That's all my people from my Facebook feed. A couple of people from my Facebook feed. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are following me on Instagram, please feel free to check with me on Facebook or either Twitch or Periscope or even YouTube. You can check us at the Black Factor on any one of those platforms. The only reason I tell my Instagram crowd that is because I want to make sure that you convert over. My Instagram only is going to last an hour, and today is going to be a very information-filled show. And especially for my people who are interested in the history of the Black Panther Party and how that applies to us today, as a matter of fact. Now, on December 4th, 1969, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were brutally assassinated by none other than Chicago's own Gang in Blue. Now, I grew up in that city, and I can tell you that the police department, in my best opinion, has never been much different than a gang. So I'm gonna just keep it 100 with you. They actually do retaliatory things, much like gangs do. They behave in very similar manners. So Fred Allen Hampton, he was born in Summit, Illinois. That is out west, I believe it is, in the city of Chicago. And he grew up in Maywood, which is on the west side. And in fact, the home that he was assassinated in is on the west side. It was at 2337 West Monroe, for those of you who don't know. Now, I'm gonna try to do this chronologically, but I need y'all to know I have information overload. I always thought I knew quite a bit about the Black Panther Party, and it's funny when you start digging into these types of things that you realize how much you don't know. And I can assure you, I learned an awful lot these last couple of days. And if I learned a lot, trust me when I tell you, I'm getting ready to drop some stuff on y'all that you probably didn't know. I see you, Riri. Thank you for checking in. Melanie and Regina, thank you for hanging out with me. I see y'all. You're in the building. The information, some of the things that I ran across, and I found out a few things that I just didn't know. I had no clue about. I had no idea. And I'm gonna tell you about them tonight, though, because when you leave this show, you're gonna be that much more enlightened about what's going on. All power to the people. Now, apparently, what happened was, now this is there's always two sides to a story, but what basically happened. And this is the part that, we get in the mainstream media. I'm going to give you that part, but I'm going to give you some more to go with it. On December 4th at 4:35 a.m., the police had surrounded the house at 2337 West Monroe on the west side of Chicago and had made plans to enter that property. And I'm guessing, because of course we'll never know the truth because they'll never tell it, I'm guessing that their entire intent coming through the door was to murder or assassinate Fred Hampton. Now, that brings us to this one little thing. When you start talking about a person like Fred Hampton, let's keep in mind that Fred Hampton was born in 1948, August 30th to be exact. Virgo, that's right, that's what's up. That it explains a lot to me. understanding what this brother was on. Now, he was, with all of the things that had been or was being accomplished, that brother was 21 years old. How many times have y'all heard me go on and on about the youth being the ones that make the difference in the movement of this country and the way things go and the way things need to go? Well, Fred Hampton was absolutely one of those people. In fact, he was what I would like to refer to as a phenom. His maturity and level of knowledge and understanding of the law, in my best opinion, go far beyond his years. I mean, he was a brilliant dude. I'm gonna get down to that. So Mark Clark, who was also in the apartment that night, on that cold pre-dawn raid that the police did on the building, apparently Mark Clark was sitting in the living room with a shotgun on his lap. Now, according to police reports, their intent was to enter the building, into the premises, with a warrant for illegal weapons. Now, let's talk about that. It amazes me how the only time weapons seem to be illegal is when people who look like this have them. I can't recall in the history of these United States any one time where any Klan headquarters, bunkhouse, storehouse, or anything else has been raided, or there has been a search for illegal weapons, not knowing whether or not there are any. But when have we ever had the occasion to see police bust in the door and murder as many people as they saw in their line of sight to serve a warrant? During those times in the 60s, that was when they would use a lot of tear gas. Well, if they wanted them to come out, why didn't they use tear gas? Because that wasn't their intent. And you have to remember that during this time, there were some very precarious, nefarious individuals in power. Okay, so Mark Clark, who was sitting in the living room with a shotgun on his lap because he had watched that night, and needless to say, everybody knew that the police were gunning for the Panthers for a multitude of reasons, not to mention the there was an earlier altercation a few weeks earlier where 2 Panthers were killed, and I think a couple of police officers were killed as well. And it always seems to only be a problem when people attempt to defend themselves. See, you got to understand that the Black Panther Party was called the Black Panther Party for self-defense, not just the Black Panther Party. They had a purpose. And most of that purpose was to stop the police brutality. Sound familiar? Sound like something we're fighting right now. To stop the police brutality and to stop or to help to eliminate as much poverty as possible. Help to build the community as much as possible. Now, Mark Clark was born in Peoria, Illinois in 1947. So he and Fred Hampton were, right there together in age. And in fact, he was a year younger. It's amazing how when anybody who seeks justice and equality from the establishment is always seen as being hateful and violent. Isn't that amazing how that happens? Anytime you try to demand, because we know they're not going to give it away freely, because like I always say, power concedes nothing without demand. They're not going to give it away. But when a person is trying to do for themselves, then suddenly they're hateful. Now, When I say that, here's what I mean. When I say trying to do for themselves, a lot of people are not aware, and I'm going to bring it to those who don't know attention right now. There are many who do know this. The Black Panthers are responsible for what we know today as the breakfast program in public schools. They got together because there were children who were hungry going to school, and who they promoted education, of course, and they promoted the betterment and the strength of the black family. But because these children many times were going to school hungry, they made sure that children within the community got a chance to eat. So they set up breakfast kitchens. Didn't cost the kids anything, and this is what they did. Now, and I'm going to add, Dennis McCullum stated that Black Panther Party started sickle cell testing in the community. Yes, they did. They also, and this is a funny little side note here. Well, it's not a side note. It's actually part of the program. Not only did they start the breakfast program in the public schools, but they also started free health clinics, free health and dental clinics in the community. Now, this was the first glimpse of what was referred to as universal health care. Ooh, that sound familiar? See? And it shows you how yet another black man brought that whole idea full circle during his presidency. See, so universal health care is a thing that came through from the ideas of poverty. Now, Fred Hampton stated on many occasions that revolutionary politics are about poverty. If you listen to, for example, the Bernie Sanders, for example, he talks about these things. A lot of people may not know Bernie Sanders was very much wore out some shoe leather, pounding the ground in regard to civil rights from the 60s. Yep, he was right out there with them. That's why a lot of people to this day are upset that he was not given his shot at the presidency, because they know his background and his history, and they know that he also has a problem with the economic differences between the rich and the poor, and the fact that we need to somehow close that gap. Right now, we're dealing with a president who has clearly stated on many occasions how great the economy is doing because the stock market is constantly growing. But that's Wall Street. The people on Main Street are not seeing the benefits in the stock market climbing to record highs. It just doesn't work that way. We live in a capitalist society. And Fred Hampton also stated on multiple occasions that racism is an excuse for capitalism. Now, how do we know this? Because on several shows that I've done here, we talked about how it was necessary to keep people divided. This is how racism in this country actually began. It was brought about for the sole purpose of economic gain. The division created enough distraction for the rich to continue to get richer and the poor to fight one another and stay subservient to the rich. This was Fred Hampton's whole mantra. So if you look at the way he did the things that he did, you'll understand that he literally was pulling the brick from the foundation of everything this country was built on. Literally. One reason they wanted him dead. Now, at the time of his assassination, there is a little known figure. Well, not little known, because there are people from where I'm from in Chicago, we all know him. His name is Bobby Rush. Bobby Rush is today a U.S. congressman, 1st congressional district, as a matter of fact, for the state of Illinois. And Bobby Rush was, at that time of the assassination, the Minister of Defense of the Black Panther Party. And in fact, an officer was heard stating that they were going to get him next. In fact, they tried to get him that same night, but when they kicked in his door, he wasn't there. So they weren't able to get him. And he then began serving the people from that moment forward. And we thank him for his lifetime of service, in fact, and he is now still a sitting congressman in the U.S. House. So that's a good thing, because at least we have people who understood what was going on, understands what's happening, and knows where we need to be going. During the time of all of this, I want to name some names. Some of you may be familiar with, and some of them you may not. At the time, December 4th, 1969, there was Richard Nixon, who was the president at the time, racist as hell. We had J. Edgar Hoover, the cross-dresser. No slight against my LGBTQ people. But during that time, we have to remember that J. Edgar Hoover went after people for being gay in his job. He was the facilitator of a program called COINTELPRO, and we're going to get into that. That was an illegal program that they used to spy on what they called subversive groups in this country, and actually brought down a lot of them through infiltration, agent provocateurs, and people who just had an axe to grind. Now, you also had Richard J. Daly. A lot of people who are not from Chicago don't know that Richard J. Daly was basically a mobster. And if he wasn't, he had enough power and control, damn near, to control not only the state, but politics outside the state. Richard J. Daly was a very, very, very influential and powerful man. Very influential. And also a racist. He, in fact, worked overtime to make sure that the city remained segregated. Chicago, till this day, a lot of people may not know this, is one of the most segregated cities in the entire United States today. If you go to Chicago, you will literally have to be careful what neighborhoods you travel through. You are going to get funny stares if you travel in the wrong areas, because you don't belong, and they know you don't belong. The same as when they come into areas that we're in, black folks, everybody knows the game. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that he has worked all over the South seeking equality for black people. And Chicago has the most vicious and dangerous people he has ever encountered in his civil rights work. And we talking about a northern city. We ain't talking about down south. We talking about up north. But here's the funny thing about that. And here's the part where I started really learning some stuff. Fact is, usually when we talk about migration and, how black people migrated from the South and started to move north for better opportunities, jobs, and, and better living. Guess what? There were a lot of white folks who also migrated from the South up to Chicago. There were a lot of Puerto Ricans, literally from the island of Puerto Rico, that migrated to Chicago. Now, see, I never thought about this. It makes sense, but it's something that I never thought about. And all of the times when I talk about, when we talk about the migration and people coming from different places into major metropolises where there's work and there's money. And we know in the big city, there's money. Now, lastly, in those group of people that we talked about, there was a man named Edward Henrihan. Henrihan was the state's attorney at the time in Chicago. Racist as hell and a liar, basically. Because if you go back, and I'm gonna tell y'all, I got right now. I'm sitting on information overload. My head is about to explode. I got so much stuff crammed in here. I'm telling you these things, like many other things. When I talk to you about them, I'm dropping seeds. There's a lot more to learn. There's a lot more to see. You literally need to just follow up on some of the things that I'm talking about if you want the really in-depth and detailed information. But Henrihan was a tyrant, basically, and white people could do no wrong, and black people were the scum of the earth, as far as he was concerned, in my opinion. Now, the people who migrated from these other cities, not only black, but white, and we talking about white Southerners, and we talking about Puerto Ricans, found out that the Lincoln Park neighborhood in Chicago, which is just north of downtown, ended up becoming 40% white. 40% Puerto Rican. In other words, they basically, kind of took over had that area on lock over there. They were gentrified out, needless to say, eventually. But here's the crazy part. They were fighting similarly to black people and the Black Panthers, as were another group who were white. Now, because here in the thing that bonded all of them was poverty. They was broke. Money brought everybody to the same table, regardless. Fred Hampton had a way of making people understand that you're no different, that they were all in the same boat. See, that's the thing. See, back to the division. When you get back to the whole division of people, it's always economic. See? Divide people, keep them broke, keep them fighting each other, and we'll keep getting that money out of them. That's how that worked. But Fred Hampton, being the dude that he was able to bring people together. So you literally had, let me see, it was the Patriots and the Young Lords. Young Patriots and the Young Lords. The Patriots were white. The Lords were Puerto Rican. And of course you had the Black Panther Party. Plus you had the Vice Lords. Yeah. You had the Gangster Disciples and so on. There were you had your Black Peace Stone Nation. Now these were all gang affiliates. Fred Hampton was the one who brokered a peace accord between those organizations. And in fact, the Black Panther Party, at the time when Fred Hampton was assassinated, they were all about to join forces. In fact, they had already begun doing things together. In other words, you had poor white folks who had their own ideas about other ethnicities. You had poor Puerto Ricans who had their own ideas about other ethnicities. And you had the Black Panther Party. Because, of course, there were people who did not believe that they should all operate together. And so they were very reluctant to make that happen, especially because the Patriots wore Confederate flags as part of their symbolism in their organization. Like, they have Confederate flags. A lot of people didn't like that. They thought that was, of course, we all know why. Because a Confederate flag to black people is like the swastika to Jews. Although some white folks will argue up and down that there's nothing wrong with it because they're not the ones that have to deal with what came from it. So these three organizations, the heads of these three organizations, were actually very cohesive. And if you listen to many of Fred Hampton's old speeches, you will find that he was very much about, not about black, not about this or that, when it came to race, but he was more about the people. Now, you got to understand just how dangerous that is in today's world. When you start talking about empowering the people and the divisions fall away because they're no longer fighting each other because of the way they look, but they're actually fighting to keep eating. See, now you're doing something different. And that within itself is a problem. So let's see here. Let me bring this up.
So we always say in the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am
a revolutionary.
And you're going to have to keep on saying that. You're going to have to say that I am a proletarian. I am the people. I'm not the pig. You've got to make a distinction. And the people are going to have to attack the pigs. The people are going to have to stand up against the pigs. That's what the Panthers are doing. That's what the Panthers are doing all over the world.
We have brought to trial here.
All right, so you get an idea of the fire that man was spitting at the masses. And it's not about black people. It's not about us as a monolith. It was about the people. It was about the poverty. It was about uplifting those who wanted to live and wanted to live freely and not get their head bashed in just because you were living in a police state. And trust me, Chicago was a police state. Look up the Democratic Convention in Chicago when the police went and basically just, beat up a whole bunch of people. Now, Richard J. Daly, and I quote, "There will be law and order in this town as long as I'm mayor." Now, that was a quote from Richard J. Daly. Who does that sound like? I'm the law and order president. Remember that? Yeah. Well, we know what it is. But the Black Panther Party had a 10-point program that they followed because there were many things that they wanted for the people. And it didn't matter what color they were. If you go back and you watch a lot of the old clips, you'll see where most of the people in a lot of the footage are not only white, they are also black and Latino. Because they had one common bond: poverty. Everybody was trying to come up. And that was a problem. The problem was that the Black Panther Party in general, outside of Chicago and across the nation, in fact, across the world, were raising so much hell that it was beginning to cause a problem. Now, Hoover, in his hypocritical way that he was, he made it clear to the rest of the world, because he had the power and he had the way, the means by which to do it. He claimed that the Black Panther Party, if not stopped, had the ability to literally change the United States from the way that it always had been, which is not a bad thing. But basically, they were concerned about them destroying power structure. So clearly, Fred Hampton, at 21 years old, had a lot of clarity about the possibilities of what could be done within what the Black Panther Party stood for. Now, some of the main things they wanted: true education, decent housing, fair trials with a jury of their peers, which brings me back to when we talk about elections and we talk about participating in the civil system that we have in this country. A lot of people, I don't vote, I don't want to vote, I don't want to. And a lot of people avoid jury duty. Y'all don't even want to get me started on my rant about not doing jury duty. You need to go and do jury duty. It is imperative. If you intend for the people who look like you to get a fair shake, more of us have to be sitting on those juries. Otherwise, we're left with others who have their own opinions of us based on very little information or the wrong information, making decisions about our freedom or about whether or not we are guilty or not guilty. We should be very, very mindful of that. So, fair trials with a jury of their peers and to end police brutality, which all of these same things, you can't name one of them that is not taking place right now today that we have to be mindful of. Every last one of these few points that I just mentioned, this is not even the 10 points. This is just the basic stuff. Education, real equal education, not the kind where the kids got to fight over the books and that type of thing. Decent housing, fair trials with a jury of our peers, and to stop police brutality. We've talked about it before, where black folks, black communities are over-policed all the time. This is why you can't do anything. In the black community, there's way more police officers. There's way more people paying attention to every little thing that's going on. We've already been historically corralled in certain areas. See, that takes us back to the show we did when we talked about redlining and the way a lot of these communities were developed historically from the 40s all the way forward. And there's still many of them in the same situation and condition today. See, all of this is systematic. And it all has come full circle. So people, when they talk about they're not interested in history and they don't care about, what happened before. You have to care, because this is how we end up getting to where we are. Now, how many people have heard of the Rainbow Coalition? That was something that everybody thought Jesse Jackson came up with. Nope. That was the work of none other than the Black Panther Party and Fred Hampton, the chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. Okay? What he called it was the Rainbow Coalition. This was because the other organizations of white and Puerto Rican people began to come together. They began to march together. They began to protest together. And they began to organize. This is a direct threat to what we know as these United States. There was a program, and now it's time for my shameless plug. I wrote about it in this book, The Black Factor. If you don't have your copy, order one now. You can get it off my website, bmforbes.com. Inside there, I talk about the COINTELPRO program, which was a program that was created during Hoover's term as FBI director, which he had been for decades. This man literally controlled a multitude of people's lives. You ought to do your homework on J. Edgar Hoover. That dude right there. He single-handedly did so much damage to this country. It's unreal. He's the reason why right now today there is a 10-year term limit on any director for the FBI so that no one else will ever have that much power and control over people. He literally controlled an awful lot of things and an awful lot of people. Well, the COINTELPRO program was basically a spy program. Now, if you look at the history, Puerto Rico became a part of the United States by force. Puerto Rico did not want to be connected to the United States, and there were groups and organizations from Puerto Rico who were considered by the United States government to be subversive. They were considered to be dangerous, and they wanted to stop the United States from basically sucking them up, annexing them. See, there's still a lot of resentment with Puerto Ricans for the United States today, especially after y'all's president went over there and threw paper towels at them. They already don't want to be a part of this, but they are. And this is yet another part of this situation that is just not, it ain't cool. So the three organizations began to come together, and they weren't fighting each other anymore over the trivial nonsense of what color you are, what color I am, and that type of thing. It was more about what can we do to take down the power structure that keeps us all in poverty. Okay. Now, this Rainbow Coalition, or what they say, poor people's power. That's what it was. This was your first Rainbow Coalition. This is what Jesse Jackson did was a spinoff of this Rainbow Coalition. And it's what he used as his platform when he ran for president, his Rainbow Coalition, which, of course, like I said, he did not, he didn't generate the idea, but he did bring more attention to it, or at least try to. I don't know if the message got watered down, diluted, or what happened with that. But y'all know what it is. So when let me see, I got a couple of when the police brought themselves to let me turn that off. When they came to I want to show y'all this picture. When they came to Fred Hampton's residence on that night, it was pretty cold outside. It was 4:35 in the morning. He was actually asleep. Now, of course, you would think that by somebody knocking and kicking in your door and firing guns, you'd wake right up. You would think that. But guess what? It turns out he had been drugged. He had been drugged by someone who had a very self-serving agenda. This fella right here, his name is William O'Neal. William O'Neal was a snitch. William O'Neal got his 30 pieces of silver, if you will. The Judas Iscariot of the Black Panther Party. That is him right there. Now, it turns out that Mr. O'Neal had gotten himself into some situations. And he decided, after having, of course, being coerced by the federal agents, he said that he would basically inform to them the movements and whereabouts of Fred Hampton and others in the Black Panther Party. But the problem was, this guy O'Neal, he was also the head of Fred Hampton's security. That's a direct line to Fred Hampton. He had keys to their headquarters and many of their safe houses. He knew where everything was. This guy was a snitch. Now the thing about Fred Hampton and them, and they needed this guy O'Neal. Why? Because they couldn't put their hands on Fred Hampton or the Black Panther Party through force. Because like Ida B. Wells said once before, the more black people take time out to defend themselves and make sure that they are willing to fight back, that our survival or chances of survival are much greater. The Black Panther Party was fully aware of this. And we know this by the actions taken by Huey Newton and James and Cleaver and all the other guys out in California who are now famous for their protest on the California Capitol with their firearms brandished, which was the invent of the Mulford Act. That was the gun laws that they began to put in place in California during that time that have affected gun laws throughout the nation ever since. We're talking about 1968 when this happened. So O'Neal knew where everything was. He knew where all the players were. He knew where all the skeletons were. So they got him to roll over. And that reminds me, do not, ladies and gentlemen, early 2021, there is a movie coming out about this very story. And it's called Judas and the Messiah. It is the Fred Hampton story, and they will discuss the relationship between William O'Neal and Fred Hampton and the way Fred Hampton was assassinated through this in this situation. Now, also, during the time of the assassination, it was said that the police were in a shootout. Well, according to the Black Panther Party, the lawyers, and everybody else who wasn't a police officer, they called it a shoot-in because the police shot into this apartment. Now, according to police reports and testimony, a lot of which I've checked out, they claim that there was a hail of bullets coming from that apartment and they were shooting basically to defend themselves. They were said to be by Hanrahan, who was the state's attorney at the time, to be heroes. And they did their job and they were professional and they did everything by the book. All of it, every last bit of it was a lie. And it just goes to show you how far we actually have and have not come. Because let's put it into perspective. There were no cell phones, no body cameras, none of the things that we today use to have convincing enough evidence to prove that what we're saying is actually the truth or relevant, because of course we're not supposed to get the benefit of the doubt, right? So because of that, the public, needless to say, had nothing good to say about the Black Panthers or any of their activities or any of what they were trying to do. If you were what during that time Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party referred to as a fascist, if you were a fascist, of course, you went with what they referred to as the pigs. And to break down the scenario, the police came to the door, announced that they were at the door. 5 seconds later, they began shooting inside the apartment. Mark Clark, who was sitting in the living room with a 12 gauge on his lap, never got a shot off. He was shot in the chest, in the heart, as a matter of fact. And his 12 gauge went off and it fired into the ceiling. This was after he had been shot. They then went in and finished shooting, or were shooting, just shooting up the whole joint. They injured, I believe it was 7 other people. Fred Hampton was laying in his bed, sleep, because he had been drugged by none other than William O'Neal. He put a barbiturate in the drink because he prepared their food after they had just come back from a teaching rally. And he prepared their food for the evening, drugged him. So when the police came in, he literally never jumped up or any of that. Someone in that apartment, now his at the time fiance, Deborah Johnson, shook him and said that the police were there and they were shooting, and they said he raised his head up and he never really got up. He just kind of looked around and he laid back down. Well, the police came in. They shot several people. They missed her, thankfully. She was 9 months pregnant. She was due to deliver Fred Hampton's son, Fred Hampton Jr., within 2 weeks. So they busted in and put a gun point blank to his head, shot him twice. He never got up. They then dragged his body into the doorway. Graphic content, y'all. So that is Fred Hampton dead on the floor. Now, from there, apparently the police department never did secure the location after the killing. So people were able to actually go in and take pictures, and the Black Panther Party began giving tours of the apartment to show that there were no weapons fired by anyone within the apartment during this so-called raid. There were none. There were no shots fired. The only shot fired in the entire time while this was taking place was the one fired by Mark Clark after he had been shot through the heart as a reaction. It was a reactionary, you know how your body, well, you don't know, but your body clenches up after something like this traumatic happens. And this is what was Chicago's finest. They're very pleased with themselves, very happy, smiling, all smiles. I'm sure if they had high fives back then, they'd have been doing those with each other after their murder of Fred Hampton. Now, these are some of the things that historically, you know, they don't want to, they're very careful about the way these stories get crafted and the way these things are laid out. But just goes to show you how people really are. He is currently buried in Hayesville, Louisiana. And there have been a few occasions where this has been done to his tombstone. People went out and shot up the man's grave. No peace even in death. That's tragic. But this is what we have and have had to deal with throughout the history of these United States. Dare you ask, how dare you demand equality or justice? You don't deserve it, according to people that are willing to go this far. The Black Panthers that had been considered very violent and subversive. But guess what? They were never the aggressors. Never. Never the aggressors. They only were trying to always, defend themselves. It's the Black Panther Party for self-defense. It's always been that way. It's amazing how the aggressors always manage to claim to be the victims. Sounds like a president I've heard of. Always sticking at people, stabbing at people, poking at people, hitting people, talking about people. But the minute there's pushback, how dare you? How dare you? I'm the victim here. Oh my God, it's not fair. Look at what you're doing to me. Yeah. Well, the thing was, it became necessary for them to eliminate someone this powerful at the age of 21. Can you imagine had he had more years to shape and change the world the way he already had? One of the guys from the Young Lords, which was the Puerto Rican part of these movements, he said that the police were harder on them when they became political than they were when they were a gang. Fear of a black planet, baby. Y'all know what it is. So I want to talk more about this COINTELPRO. Now, COINTELPRO is the same spy program, that's what I'm going to call it, the spy program, that was used to keep up with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. COINTELPRO is the reason why anybody ever suspected that Dr. King may have had a mistress. The only reason that people knew certain things about Dr. King is because they were in the record of the FBI in this COINTELPRO program. The COINTELPRO program was dismantled after it was exposed and found that it was illegal. And it had been for decades, but the amount of damage that it did, nobody ever paid any cost for it. Nobody ever, Hoover never got, everybody was scared of Hoover. He had information on everybody. And right before he died, he had so much information, Nixon was worried about what all the information that he had. So he sent some people to try and get this information, but Hoover's secretary beat them to it, and she shredded everything. Never did a day. And then don't they call that destroying evidence? Imagine that. Well, here's another thing. It turns out that there was another organization. Now, y'all remember when I talked about, when I got into the whole thing about, when we were talking about Black Lives Matter and we were talking about the protests and all the things that were going on months ago. And I always talked about agent provocateurs and other people who would inject themselves into a movement for their own purposes. Well, prime example. There was an organization during this time called the Weather Underground, SDS. The Weather Underground was a domestic terror organization, basically. And they, in fact, invoked the name of the Black Panther Party during some of their shenanigans. So dig this. Fred Hampton denounced any affiliation or connection to them because they kept using the Black Panther Party as to say that they're a part of it, which is very, very similar to the way right now you have people who are claiming that the Black Lives Matter is connected to Antifa. See, Antifa is your Weather Underground of 1969 and on, because they did a lot more damage after 69 into the 70s. And Black Lives Matter is your Black Panther Party, just to give you a reference. So the Weather Underground, right after Hampton's assassination on the 4th of December of 1969, on the 6th of December of 1969, they did a bombing campaign. They blew up a bunch of police cars and a few other things. That's how serious Weather Underground was. And this is why Fred Hampton distanced himself, or tried to, from what they were about. But everybody wanted to get on board. Dennis McCullum, you are absolutely correct. History repeating itself, and this is why I say all the time how important history is, and if you don't know it, you're doomed to repeat it or get caught up in it. And here we are, all over again. 51 years later, this is the 51st anniversary right now today at 4:35 this morning of the assassination of the chairman of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party. 4:35 in the morning on this day, 1969. And like was stated earlier by Riri on the Facebook feed, gotta watch them snakes. You got to watch them snakes, man. Authority has zero respect for anyone who fights back. The Black Panther Party was about that life. They were fighting back. Now, according to William O'Neill, the snitch, the Judas Iscariot of the Black Panther Party, he didn't believe that they were going to kill Fred Hampton. He thought that he was just going to provide some information. But you got to ask yourself, what would he be thinking? What would he think they wanted this information for? Was he going to live with Fred Hampton being locked up, arrested, put in the penitentiary as a political prisoner for the rest of his life so that he could save his own skin? What did he think was going to happen? Knowing that it had resorted at this point in history to gunplay. He claimed he didn't believe that the police were going to kill him. He was basically trying to get himself out of trouble. What do you know about people like that? They exist. They out here, y'all. There's nothing we can do about it. We just try to stay away from them and keep clear. You got to keep clear. So as it turns out, all of the other organizations, the Young Lords, the Young Patriots, all disbanded after the murder and assassination of Fred Hampton. They all, in fact, the gentleman who was at the head of, and I don't have his name in front of me, I apologize, who was at the head of the Young Patriots was from Tennessee, and he actually went back to Tennessee and left the city. In fact, a lot of people left the city after his assassination because Daly did what Daly does. He used the hammer to hit the nail to eliminate any threat or enemy, as he had on many prior occasions throughout his history in the city of Chicago as mayor, which, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was around 40 years that he was mayor of the city. Dennis McCullum says, so what events will come to pass that are arising and can prevent? That, my man, is a fantastic question. I don't believe that there are any preventable scenarios because this country is far too divided at this time, and there are too many different ideologies that would cause difference. As an example, after the assassination of Fred Hampton, there was a race in political campaigns in Chicago. And that year, when Edward Hanrahan, the epitome of crooked, especially in this case, and I remember hearing about him as a child. I mean, because you got to remember, I was a kid when all this was going on. But I do remember his name well, and it was never anything good said. But Hanrahan, who ran for his office again, was defeated by a Republican. Now you might think, so what? Well, guess why? The reason he lost was because black people came out in force and voted Republican. They voted for a Republican. Everybody else on the entire ticket during that election was Democrat that won. The only Republican that won beat Edward Henry because of his involvement, his lies, his double dealing, and underhandedness and murder of Fred Hampton. On this day, 1969, 51 years ago, that is what he did. I like this picture right here, y'all, with my sisters. All power to the people. They're looking good right there. We need to see more of that. More unity in the community, y'all. So it turns out. Now, quick point. When you think about and you ask yourself what the United States government and local government was afraid of, I'm going to tell you. Y'all see how Twitler has all of these followers that don't care what he does or says that is patently wrong. They don't care. They love the man. This is what these people were afraid of in Fred Hampton. J. Edgar Hoover said himself that they could not afford for him to become a Messiah. They could not afford for this man to be in the ear of blacks, whites, and Hispanics. But here's the even more interesting part. He wasn't just in the hearts and minds of blacks, whites, and Hispanics. He had begun connecting globally with people in poverty, people in other countries. People used the Black Panther movement as momentum of their own to fight oppression globally. You got to understand, this thing runs deep, deep. And I'm going to say this again. What's the most amazing of all of this? 21 years old. That man was 21 years old. Listen, I encourage you. I'm telling you, if you ever get a chance, just go on YouTube, go on some of these platforms, just watch some of the footage, listen to some of the speeches. The man talked fast. Man, like a machine gun, he be out there. And he telling you the game, he giving you the whole game. And what's crazy about it, nothing has changed. What he was demanding hasn't changed as far as our needs. What he got for his demands hasn't changed yet. We still are fighting for the exact same things, but nobody is ready to run out there and be the man. Well, I personally think that the way this country operates, we are now at a place where it's becoming more and more complicated to try and assassinate somebody. So what they do now is they character assassinate you rather than physically assassinate you. And then that way they don't have to worry about making you into a martyr. Because that's what they've done in Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party and all the other people, the Martin Luther Kings and the Malcolm X. The people they assassinated became martyrs. Even people who didn't like them at the time now have better things to say about these people. For my Instagram people, if the feed shuts off, please feel free to connect with me on Twitch, Periscope, Facebook, or YouTube, The Black Factor, on all of those platforms. Just find one, just in case the feed cuts out, because I believe we only have an hour on there, and we are not quite done. So switch over if you need to. So moving forward. In 1972, like I said, during these times of election, one of the gentlemen who was a part of the Young Lords ran for alderman, and he won. And Bobby Rush, at that time, ran for alderman, and he won. Bobby Rush has served politically for most of his entire life. He went from being the defense minister of the Black Panther Party, the Chicago chapter, to alderman, and now U.S. congressman. Where are my people, my young people? And I've said this before, I'm going to keep on beating this dead horse. I need my young folks to get involved. I need my young folks to want to make change and bring about the Rainbow Coalition that began with the Black Panther Party, not Jesse Jackson. A lot of y'all may not know, Jesse was a reverend at the time, and he did eulogize Fred Hampton at his funeral. Let me see, I might have. Yes, he did. There's going to, let me see, come a time where a lot of the things that we take so much for granted are going to kick us in the butt. We got to be prepared for that. Now, this right here is a post with William O'Neill, the snitch, the crowd at the funeral, and Fred Hampton in his casket. Okay. So, y'all, I want to make sure that I cover everything that I wanted to get in tonight. I got so much information. I got information overload, man. My head about to explode. You'll see my stretch marks on my forehead. I know I had some other stuff here I wanted to show y'all, but oh well. We'll just keep going. Anyway, the main thing is that today is a day that we need to be able to, I don't want to say celebrate, but remember. And remember why we're where we are and how we got here. And Fred Hampton had an awful lot to do with that, despite many people not really understanding that that is true.
Revolution has come. Time to pick up the gun. Revolution
Y'all hear that?
time to pick up the gun.
The revolution has come. It's time to pick up the guns. Now, y'all know, how many times have I said, you want gun laws to change? You want to see something different? Let every black person go out tomorrow and apply for a gun permit or go buy guns. Go watch what happens. And don't get it twisted. Now, I'm a gun advocate. I believe in my Second Amendment, even though we understand what the Second Amendment really means. Because if you watch The Black Factor, like many of you have in the past, you will understand that the Second Amendment isn't what they claim it to be. And Dennis McCullum says, why wouldn't the assassinations of a rising revolutionary not happen again? And who are the rising individuals? Why wouldn't bombing of a pro-black city be destroyed? Why wouldn't lynching start up again? How can we stop their madness? Well, the reason, Dennis, why, and I'm going to hit every last one of these points, the reason why none of those things, well, let me back up. You're right. Not all of them. One thing is very possible. Some individual could very possibly and very easily be assassinated in regard to the uplifting of people. As long as they focus specifically and strictly on black people, they won't be touched. The minute they begin to rally many people, like we've witnessed this year, like Fred Hampton said, you can do anything you want to a revolutionary, but you cannot do anything to a revolution. These people may make attempts at someone's life, but it's not going to stop that ball from being passed on to the next runner, because it's going to happen. Aside from which, they learned, now this is my philosophy, and I've been saying this for years. They've learned that if you kill people off who are at the forefront of movements, you create martyrdom. You create a martyr. You cannot do it like that anymore. It's dangerous. People are more ideological now, I think, than we've ever been. Look at Donald Trump. He has got a hell of a following. If something happened to him tomorrow, the rest of the country is in trouble. Do y'all understand that? People are going to swear that the deep state killed him, and the CIA and the FBI and everybody went after him, and they're going to rise up. Nothing better happen to him. I'm telling you. Listen, and like I always say, y'all, I hope I'm wrong. And when it comes to the facts of this show, I'm going to say another thing. Like I always say, don't believe me, look it up. I have to put those two disclaimers in there. But I don't believe that they have the balls to kill off a revolutionary. It's dangerous. And I don't mean that Trump is a revolutionary. Don't get that twisted. Lynching and other things like that, what you're saying, would not come to pass, because we no longer operate, number one, in fear. So you got to remember, everything that's ever been done to people around the world by colonizers has been done out of straight up violence and fear. Well, we've learned from a very good teacher to be equally as violent. We're not afraid. So, not so much, number one. Number two, you have to also remember that we are not alone in this. Just like we weren't alone in slavery. There were people, white people, who fought against slavery. There were white people, they were called abolitionists. There were white people who assisted in the Underground Railroads and other things to make it possible for slaves to escape slavery. Or should I say, for Africans to escape slavery. There have been a mass showing of people of other ethnicities and races at every last one of these marches this year. Kyle Rittenhouse, a white minor, because he definitely was not of age, who shot and killed 2 people in Wisconsin this year who were also white. That's how you know that the ideas of the past are going to inadvertently and eventually be the demise of those who will try to further those causes. It's not, part of what gets these people in trouble is because they still think the way they did 100 years ago. And they think that that ideology is actually going to work today. They might get away with a little something here and a little something there. But even with all of the empowerment that Trump has given to racists and bigots and just general fools, they're not that bold. They may appear to be. They go and they wave their guns around and like they got something to prove. But trust me, it's a whole different animal when you start pulling the trigger. And it's even more crazy when somebody's pulling the trigger back at you. So let me put it this way. I suspect that anything that comes forward will probably be something else that we haven't seen before. Everything else we've already seen, none of that's going to work. You can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution. Now, they tried it during a time when, they didn't have when the support wasn't all there. But I think that we're in a different place right now today. I believe that. And hell, I could be wrong. But we'll see. The Black Panther Party was labeled as a black nationalist hate group, all run in Chicago by a man who was 21 years old, whose wisdom far exceeded his years, whose ability to bring people together was like no other. Didn't matter what the color was. All they had to do was want more for the people and to shut down fascism. Oop, did I say a bad word? Fascism. That's that same word that we keep hearing, and we've been hearing for the last couple of years right here in 2020 because of a particular individual who was supposed to be running America, but I think he was playing golf. Racism is an excuse, is the excuse for capitalism. Racism is the reason capitalism thrives and survives. Until black folks, or should I say, po-black folks, po-white folks, po-Hispanic folks, po-everybody gets together and decides to make change and stop worshiping the dollar and those who have it, things are going to be very, very crazy. We have got to get past the nonsense. Y'all, don't forget that you got to watch the movie that's coming out, Judas and the Messiah. It's about this very same story. There was another part in here that I neglected to mention. We talk about the media and the news and the way they handle things. I didn't know this, but I found this out. The first movie that depicted Puerto Ricans was West Side Story. And like blacks, they got basically labeled after that as being incestuous, violent, ignorant, and hateful. All of the things that the people who point fingers at them had become, or always were, actually. And this is the same thing that we suffer from right now today with our own media. I'm happy to say that finally good movies are actually coming out with black folks in it, but we've got a little more control over that, thanks to people like Tyler Perry. And don't get it twisted. I'm not, y'all can say whatever you want about that man, but understand that his ability to bring our story to the big screen in a way that he and nobody can touch him on it, that's a phenomenal feat. The hell with the subject matter of the movies. Somebody paying him. He's employing an awful lot of people. He's keeping actors and actresses that we haven't seen in a decade busy working. I have absolutely nothing bad to say about him. But my point being that until we are able to control our own image, we will always be labeled by what they think they know based on fiction. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is very, very unfortunate. But this same thing happened and has happened to other groups of people throughout media history. Another point. During that firefight in that apartment on West Monroe in Chicago, The police fired 99 shots. 99 in that apartment. One shot came from the dead shotgun of Mark Clark into the ceiling after he had been shot in the heart. They shot 99 rounds, and one cop had a fully automatic machine gun. Now, they used the cache of weapons that was found to try and say and talk about how savage the Black Panthers were. I heard one of the state's attorneys say, "Look at these weapons. Look how dangerous they are. Look how everything." He just went on down the whole list of all of the derogatory words he could think of to call them because of the guns they had. And why is that? Is it because the guns they had were in the hands of black people? I mean, his officers had machine guns. We know that the KKK been well armed for a century. We know that the militias and all of the white supremacy and the white nationalist groups, they all got guns. Had them then, have them now. What's the problem? Oh, that's right. They black. My bad. So this was a case for them, the Chicago Police Department, to become judge, jury, and executioner within a 1 minute span. Came right in, murdered the man, left his fiance a fatherless child. And here we are again. All right, y'all. I've tried not to forget stuff, but it's so much, and there's so much more that I have not spoken about in regard to this. So all I can say, because I can't go all night, I could, but I ain't going to. Do your homework. Today's show was done because it is the 51st anniversary of the assassination of Fred Allen Hampton in Chicago, Illinois, December 4th, 1969. So I wanted to pay tribute to him, point out some facts, talk about why it's important that we know what has happened in the past and what we need to do to move into the future by understanding everything that has already happened. The more we understand about what's already happened, the easier it is for us to move forward and understand, moving forward, what has to happen in order for our survival to be imminent. So I'm going to leave you with this last shot of my man Fred Hampton in his glory at the podium, doing what he does best. I encourage you, go to YouTube, go to one of these other platforms, watch the man speak, listen to what he has to say, listen to the stories, check out the facts. It's deep. It's real deep. And like I said, there's only so much I can do on here today. There's a lot more to this. So, with that said, y'all, don't forget to get your copy of The Black Factor, available at bmforbes.com. Y'all can also follow this show. Oh, I'm starting to get away from Facebook. So I want y'all to join Twitch or go to YouTube, check out Periscope, and even now I'm on what is this thing? Instagram. I gotta figure out a way to get Instagram where they can see all the visuals and everything too. So we're moving on to bigger and better platforms. So I'd like for you to continue following what we do. So jump on any one of those platforms anytime you like. It's all at The Black Factor. Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope. I can't even think of all of them. Anyway, that's what it is, y'all. I appreciate each and every one of you for coming on today and hanging out with me, because y'all know I love doing what I do. I hope that I've been able to enlighten, encourage, inspire, motivate, move, awaken somebody. I hope. Look, y'all have yourselves a wonderful evening. Thank you so much. We'll be back on Wednesday. I think on no, today is Wednesday. Oops, sorry. We'll be back on Friday. And on Friday, we're going to have Free Thinker Friday. And I believe we're going to have an interview with an entrepreneur, someone who has got something that all of y'all want. Trust me. Stay tuned for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. I want everybody to have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful evening. Love, peace, and chicken grease. We is up out of here, y'all.